Kleitos the White, murdered in Thrace in 318 BCE. One of the very few Macedonians to make a name for himself as a naval commander, Kleitos the White's eccentricities also set the stage for the extravagant and strange behavior of the Hellenistic monarchs who would eventually emerge from the wreckage of the wars of the Successors. Though we do not know anything about his early career, the fact that Craterus placed him in charge of the Cilician fleet suggests that Kleitos had gained fame and experience as a naval commander during the voyage down the Indus and or during Nearchus's voyage from India back to Babylon. Kleitos first appears in a prominent role when he was dispatched by Craterus to aid Antipater in his battle against the formidable Athenian fleet during the Lamian War of 322 BCE. The Athenians were eager to keep their Black Sea grain routes open, and the Macedonians were just as determined to prevent this from happening. Kleitos joined his ships with those of Antipater, and he commanded the combined Macedonian fleet. Though the Athenian fleet was large and well equipped, it did not have the high quality and zeal of the Athenian fleet of the 5th century. Kleitos, by contrast, not only possessed more of the newer ship types, the quadrireme and quinquireme, but also had more sailors with experience in combat. Kleitos led the Macedonians to two relatively easy victories at Abydos and Amorgos, which cleared the sea and allowed Craterus's land forces to unite with Antipater's. Without Kleitos's great victories, the decisive Battle of Cranon could not have happened, and the Greeks might have actually managed to overrun Macedon or completely detach Thessaly, either of which could plausibly have occurred and would have changed the landscape completely. Following his twin victories and his salvation of Macedon, Kleitos began to fancy himself a real-life Poseidon, and he began dressing like the gods and standing on the prow of his flagship holding a trident. Greeks and Macedonians did not literally believe that they themselves were gods, contrary to what some popular history texts sometimes say, but they did believe that they as individuals can serve as human manifestations of the gods on earth. So while Kleitos' actions may have indeed appeared to be signs of mental instability to some, especially at Athens where such behavior was seen as barbaric, Kleitos was mainly looked at askance for exhibiting such great hubris. In Greek myth and tragedy, hubris always precedes a great downfall. During the First War of the Successors, Kleitos ignored Perdiccas's orders to block the Hellespont on his behalf and instead defected to Antipater and Craterus, playing a key role in allowing their armies to pass into Asia Minor for the showdown with Eumenes. It is likely that Kleitos was convinced to change sides by Antigonus, who is known to have convinced Asander and a couple of other leaders to abandon Perdiccas's cause. Antipater remembered Kleitos' vital services against the Greeks and Perdiccas when he gave him the rich satrapy of Lydia in the settlement at Triparadisus in 321. Antipater's death in 319 began a new round of wars. Unfortunately for Kleitos, he found himself at odds with the newly empowered Antigonus the One-Eyed, who then had the largest army in the empire. Garrisoning his cities, Kleitos sailed to Europe to confer with Polyperchon. Polyperchon sent him to relieve the besieged and hapless Aridaeus at Chios to prevent Antigonus from taking control of a Hellespontine crossing. When he arrived there, Kleitos defeated an equal or greater force under Cassander's admiral Nicanor, near Byzantium. This was an impressive victory which shifted the balance of power on the seas greatly to his favor. Elated, Kleitos beached his ships on the Gallipoli Peninsula, and he and his crews partied. The would-be Poseidon had won a great victory, but he had not only overestimated its magnitude, but greatly underestimated the daring of Antigonus. Though Nicanor had lost around half of his men and their morale was shattered, Antigonus made him ferry some of his ground forces to Europe under the cover of night. In the morning, Nicanor sailed against the beaches, and the unprepared and hungover Kleitos had to try to sail out at a great tactical disadvantage. Success in ancient naval warfare depended on achieving ramming speed and having room to maneuver. both of which advantages fell to Nicanor. Meanwhile, Antigonus struck from the land side. The result was a victory so complete that it rendered Kleitos' earlier triumph devoid of meaning. Kleitos lost every single ship under his command save his own, which he used to sail to Thrace. When he reached Thrace, he was arrested and executed by the satrap Lysimachus. Kleitos was perhaps the greatest naval commander that the Greek world had spawned since the Athenian Timotheus decades before. Kleitos did a good job in promoting his naval skills and leveraging his way into the prestigious and financially rewarding province of Lydia. However, while his successes and connections gave him a potential path to power, he was brought down by a combination of factors. First, though it seems trite, his hubris made him seem dangerous and annoying to his contemporaries. He was so convinced of his own genius that he did not take the necessary precautions to keep the enemy at bay or move to finish him off entirely. Perhaps more importantly, however, is that Kleitos' power was based on having a fleet rather than an army. In the ancient world, despite so much scholarship promoting the importance of naval power, land power was more permanent, and sea power was always secondary to strength on land. As no less a military genius than Alexander the Great proved, a navy without a home port is close to worthless and poses no danger. Had Kleitos kept his head in the game and balanced his special abilities on the waves with a combined land effort, even on a limited scale, then he probably could have become a major contender.